Dating is fucked for modern men, and I'm not saying that lightly. Since 2008, the amount of guys who've gone the previous year without having sex a single time has almost tripled. The amount of men who are single has been increasing up to the point where now 60% of guys are single. It's getting worse, and it's getting worse every single year. There are a number of reasons for that, some of which you've probably never even thought of, that you're completely unaware of, and they are holding you back and pulling you down from having the kind of dating success you want without you even knowing it. And once you understand what is causing this epidemic of male loneliness, as it's known, once you understand why it's happening, then you might actually be one of the guys who escapes it, who's able to get success despite the overall cultural situation. Now, let's start with one that's controversial, but that has to be talked about. Me Too. The Me Too movement has made men feel like anything they do with women puts a target on their back. That existing is toxic masculinity. Saying hi to a girl, you might get fired. So here's the reality. It's true that Louis C.K. lost his career and he didn't break any laws, right? He just did something people felt uncomfortable with, which was asking and getting consent, as far as I'm aware, to jacking off, in front of women. Other people like Al Franken, he lost his career as a senator because of making crude sexual jokes that, as far as I'm aware, there was consent with all of that, but someone complained. And he bowed down. Conservatives, they fight it. Liberals, they just say, "Yeah, I'm guilty automatically for existing." So that is what it is. Brett Kavanaugh, Andrew Tate, Russell Brand, Trump. The people who've gotten accusations. The list goes on and on and on. And some of them turn out to have no evidence. I believe recently a famous Twitch streamer named Rich Campbell got an accusation that he was able to win in court against. And we'll see. I mean, there's another one, Mizkiv. I feel like there's a higher chance he seems like a messed up guy. But some of them may be guilty. Some of them may be innocent. We will find out, or may never find out with some of them. But just existing as a man, you see all these stories. And all of these people losing their careers. In some cases, like Jack Denmo, going to jail. And he may or may not have been completely innocent. I read through the evidence. He's another YouTuber, by the way. He's just was making red pill content about how to be attractive to women. So he was in the dating advice niche, and he ended up taking a girl home. They consensually did some stuff sexually at first, third base, and then afterwards, he pulled out a camera to get a consent video. Don't do that. That was, with permission, but he did that without asking. And very autistic thing to do, and then she got uncomfortable. After that, he said that, it consensually resumed, and she says it wasn't after that. I don't know, right? But a judge determined that he was guilty, because in Canada, for this kind of thing, they don't use a jury, which is crazy. They just use a judge, and the evidence just has to be greater, more likely that he's guilty than not, as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. That's my understanding anyway. So this guy ends up going to jail for it. So you see all these examples, and it's like, why go through it? Why try to, do things like improve myself and approach women and, use dating apps? And why do that when I could just end up the next guy who's Me Too'd? On some level, guys are thinking this. It's in the back of their mind. It's an excuse, a reason not to do it. Now, just because it's an excuse doesn't mean it's invalid. The reality with this one is, for the vast majority of men, you're not at any significant risk. Like, I'm not saying it could never happen, but I've heard of two examples, one of which was somewhat of a public figure, and one of which was just a random guy who got into scenarios, Me Too kind of scenarios. Both of them ignored huge red flags. And whether, they might not have done anything illegal, but what they did was dumb, right? They got into situations that were really dumb. So it's rare. For a normal person, you see social media, we live our lives through social media. We now have this vicarious kind of relationship where our lives are influenced by all these influencers, all these people, without knowing them and without having lives that are in any way related to them, but because we're watching them, because we're vicariously consuming all their content, it feels like a part of us and it influences the way we think without even knowing it. And so we feel, as the average guy, that we're at risk of, being the next Louis C.K. or whatever. But if you're not an influencer, you're not a public figure. I've heard thousands of hookup stories of people who are either clients or people who watch my content or people in my groups or whatever, and have never had an instance of this, right? There's two people I knew. Those had nothing to do with my clients or people I knew or my community or anything like that. Two people in all my years. And both of them were you had to be really desperate to get laid to put yourself into those scenarios. But there were obvious red flags. So this one feels legitimate, but you're not famous. No one cares. Going after you doesn't have the same benefits as going after someone who's a multimillionaire or like ruining a celebrity's career. There's a Schadenfreude element to that. There's a much lower chance of this happening to a regular guy. Not to say it's impossible, but it's super unlikely, enough to the point where it shouldn't even really enter your mind. And what you should realize is the way our brain works is, and this is going to get nerdy really quick, but we evolved over thousands of years, or millions of years, really. Our brain evolved over millions of years, and most of that took place before modern society, modern language, before we lived in a world with big cities and technology and all of that. Throughout most of history, we lived in very dangerous environments. And so our brain had to conserve energy. Food wasn't guaranteed. Not being prey of some saber-toothed tiger or some bullshit wasn't guaranteed. You didn't really have shelter. Like all these things that we take for granted, we didn't have, and our brain still thinks that way. That's why anxiety disorders exist. Because we are looking for threats. Even if there are none, we feel like there must be some because that's how our brain's wired. When we sense a possible threat like this, we over-exaggerate its value in our mind. And because another mission or another, what our brain is designed to do is to avoid expending energy unnecessarily, to conserve energy because playing it safe was necessary for survival. Crucial for survival. Otherwise, you would just end up dead. Telling yourself that I'll just end up in one of these scenarios is a great way to not have to do the things like getting a pro photo shoot, like using the dating apps, actually messaging girls, following through, going on dates, approaching women, dealing with rejection. All those things require energy. They require discomfort. And we are just deeply programmed to avoid that, to avoid discomfort. And that very cleanly leads into my next point, which is we avoid discomfort and we seek comfort. That's our natural way of operating. All businesses are basically supposed to get rid of some kind of discomfort and give us some kind of comfort. Tinder removes the need to approach a girl, which is uncomfortable, makes it easier. Fast food, don't have to go gather food or don't even have to cook food. You just get it right away. So all these different things are removing discomfort, including social media and porn. They're very comfortable. And just like a bag of chips is convenient, easy to eat, but it doesn't actually take care of your needs, right? It doesn't actually make you satiated, right? It doesn't give you good nutrients, but it's better than nothing. Like it takes care of the minimum threshold. The same is true of porn, TikTok, watching Netflix, playing video games, all these kinds of things, because you can still jack off and then you get the basic need taken care of, right? On an evolutionary level, your mind is like, oh, I'm satisfied, right? That's good enough. Like it doesn't really fully understand that the naked women you're seeing aren't real. Because our brain subconsciously just doesn't understand the concept of screens, of TV, of movies, of all these things, which is why they affect us emotionally and why they stimulate us, right? If we knew they were fake, we wouldn't care. So on some level, we believe them unconsciously. And so you believe you're surrounded by these naked women, you're getting that need satisfied, but it's not really doing enough. And so you could go out and approach women. You could use the dating apps and actually have to meet women and take these risks, but you can get just enough stimulation, validation, all these things, just enough through playing a video game online, through watching TV, and through porn, through these things. So you don't, back in the day, think in the 1970s, there were like 6 TV shows, and that would get boring. So what would you do? You would go out and hang out with friends and socialize. Now you don't have to do that. Now you can still get stimulation, or you can still get the dopamine rush much easier, right? You get access to what you want without having to face discomfort. And ultimately, it's dissatisfying. Ultimately, it's not fulfilling. And it leads you, because you're avoiding social interaction. Whenever you want to be social, you're like, well, I can play Marvel Rivals and get called the N-word, right? Get called homophobic slurs constantly. And that's still some social interaction. That feels good enough. It's better than nothing, right? And I could just watch OnlyFans or whatever, and I see a naked chick, basically cucking myself because someone else is asleep, but whatever. It's something. And so our mind, our brain will gravitate towards the lowest common denominator if it lets us avoid discomfort, because the need to avoid discomfort is greater than the desire to get what you want. Because risk is greater than reward as far as our dumb brain, our subconscious mind likes to think. Because back in the day, death was around every corner. One wrong move, you're dead. You're ostracized, you're alone in the wilderness, and you're not going to live. So we are more programmed to avoid taking any risks. And to go more into the nerdy evolution stuff, socializing, meeting strangers feels uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Why? There's not really any risk. Your girl says, you're too short, maybe, about the worst that could happen. Or like, I remember there was one girl like, where's the good looking guys? Back in the day when I heard that kind of hurt. But that's, or go away, something like that might happen here and there. A girl might be mean, right? So it doesn't actually affect you in any meaningful way. Why do we care so much about that? Because we're supposed to be in 50 to 150 person tribes where if a girl in your tribe did reject you, someone you knew did reject you, that spreads and you're fucked, right? The alpha male finds out, higher status guys find out, you're gone. They're either going to literally just beat you to death because you're lower value and they need to teach the other low status males to be in line, or they just leave you and you're alone and then you die. So we associate subconsciously socializing with dying. Sounds extreme, but that's how we feel on an unconscious level. So the idea of getting rejected by a girl, that's why our fear of public speaking is one of the greatest fears, higher than the fear of death in surveys, because they're actually very closely related. So would you rather do something that makes you face the fear of death, this intense emotional discomfort, until you get used to it? Then it becomes fun, by the way, eventually. But would you rather do that or jack off and not really feel fulfilled, but that pain of not feeling, intimacy and knowing that you're alone and no woman wants you, that's a very slow burn, right? That's like a poison, a disease that slowly tears you down and kills your soul or whatever. Very slow. You don't really notice it happening. It's like getting fat. You don't notice it happening. I'm someone who can speak to that because I did get pretty fat at one point. It's something you don't really see happening because it happens over such a long time frame. So most guys, especially after college, when you're in a less inherently social environment, and especially after COVID, a lot of people being able to work at home, it's so much easier to just take the minimal hit that's easy to get and leads to long-term consequences. But it goes back to that quote, I think one of the best quotes of all time: easy choices, hard life; hard choices, easy life. You have to become aware that you're making this trade. Whenever you do something that's comfortable in the short term, brings you a dopamine hit in the short term, lets you avoid some kind of difficulty or hardship or stress or discomfort, whenever you do that, you are making a trade that over time, you're going to become less resilient, less disciplined, have less willpower, less energy, etc. And that goes for whether it's porn or just watching TV. And I'm not saying never do any of these things ever, but most people, they take over your life because they're designed to do that. because they have teams of psychologists behind all these apps that design them in a way to take as much attention as possible, to bring you as much comfort as possible, to bring you as much of a dopamine hit as possible. And by doing that, it's actually draining your ability to make proactive decisions that help you achieve your goals in any area of life. And this became greatly worsened because of COVID, because of a whole over a year of basically being isolated by force, that even if you were a social person before that, it became so much easier to become isolated and to become, basically it's like being a battery in the matrix, right? You're powering this system, these social networks, these huge businesses that really, they just want your attention to serve you ads to get money. And all they're designed to do is bring you as much comfort as possible. They're finding ways to take advantage of our subconscious mind and make us do it infinitely, regardless of whether it's good for us or not. That's not even considered by these businesses, these companies. They don't care until they have to because there's bad PR. That's the only time they'll pretend to care. So we are becoming apathetic. We are becoming avoidance maximizers. Avoidance is becoming the default. And every time you avoid something, you weaken your strength, your willpower, your ability to do the things that are difficult but will move you towards your goals. And so that applies to dating. It's hard to go out and face rejection, but that also applies to your mind. It's easier to watch TikTok than to read a book about Stoic philosophy or meditation or something like that. The more often you engage in these things that bring you comfort and let you zone out and stimulate you without any effort on your part, the more accustomed to being in that mode you become. And the more you do things that are hard, eventually that feels comfortable. Like if you follow a diet, I not that long ago started doing the 1 meal a day diet. At first, very hard, not eating for the entire day. But eventually, it just feels like my default. It's just a habit. It's normal. But you have to go through a phase of discomfort, which is harder to do than ever since you have so much access to things that drain your energy, your time, and bring you comfort. So it's important to be aware of that. And it's important to be aware that if you're going to watch any porn, that's going to take away some of your drive to actually meet women in real life, because it's going to satisfy the need on a very fake level. And if you're going to, when you could be socializing, it's Friday at 10 p.m., if you're watching TV, Netflix, playing video games, you're going to reinforce doing what's easy and comfortable as opposed to what will get you what you want in life. And then you'll wake up feeling miserable and lonely and like shit, but it's because you're not willing to take those steps to do things that are challenging but will get you the success you want. And there's one final reason why men are struggling in dating more than ever before, and that's dating apps. Now, dating apps are supposed to make it easier and more convenient. But because men are thirstier for sex than women, and because it's easier for men to be isolated from dating than women, there's far more men on the apps than women. It's like 70-30, if not worse. Then women are pickier inherently, so they swipe right far less than men swipe right. So the average guy will get 1/10, if not less, as many matches as the average girl. So what does this lead to? Now, the same isn't true in reality, in real life, but online, if you're an average guy, you feel ugly. You feel like it's hopeless. But it's really just behavioral economics making it seem that way, because there's more men on the apps and because women are pickier with who they swipe right on, partly because men are much more likely to also send the first message. If you just have average pictures that you randomly chose from throughout your life, you're going to feel much uglier than you actually are. And then you see videos about how you need to be rich, you need to be ripped, you need to be at least 6 feet. Without any of these qualities, you're fucked, black pill, it's doomed, your face is your personality, wheat waffles, blah, blah, blah. Well, that kind of stuff starts to really appeal to you because you're not getting results. You don't want to take the blame for that. It's much easier to have some external thing to blame. Oh, it's modern women or whatever. They're too shallow, etc. And it's much easier to complain and to fester and to feel like a victim than to go out and do something like actually meet women in real life that will be awkward for some of the time, that will be uncomfortable at times, where you will get rejected, etc. So it's much easier to just feel like, oh, I guess that means I'm ugly, and then use that as your metric and then give up. Whereas if you did actually go out, ask 100 women on dates, you'd be surprised it would go much better than you would expect, because the dynamics in real life are very different than they are online, because they're two completely separated worlds. And if you have the balls to approach someone in real life, it already makes you stand out from all the guys on Instagram DMs, Tinder, etc. And being able to do that is quite rare. So men are fucked for quite a few reasons. Dating apps make you feel ugly unless you get a good pro photo shoot. We have infinite access to parasocial relationships with Twitch, with OnlyFans, with porn, where we can feel like we're interacting with women just vicariously, which is enough to make you feel satisfied on a base level. And it's so much more comfortable and easy than dealing with the stress and discomfort of going out and meeting women in real life. So you have that. And then you're made to feel like men wanting to meet women, approach women, put themselves out there is toxic masculinity at best, is going to get you Me Too'd at worst. So no wonder so many guys are checking out, giving up, and feeling like it's hopeless. It makes complete sense. The good thing is that if you can see this from the outside, you can see it objectively, it becomes clear that all of this might make the situation seem very difficult, but it's completely possible to overcome. And if you want to see how I can help you do that, then click the link below to learn about my 3-day boot camps.